Fevered Publishing presents Metal Rise, Shadowfast Action Thriller 3 by Cole Chase. Read by the author.
Chapter 18, 2:25 a.m. Once Manny gets most of the security staff doubting their own alarms and moving to the west side of the property, Danny walks in the same door Rory did, carrying the employee ID badge and the phone that Cooper stole so that any proximity sensors in the house see him as legit. No staff watches the lobby. He hangs a right to get to the east wing and goes down 2 stories. With Danny's parkour background, he easily negotiates the vast dining room without touching the floor. Crafted to seat 200 diners, the room features an expansive open center filled with table rounds and accompanying chairs. The architects dedicated all the walls of the room to table service. Every 6 feet, a pillar supports a sconce, providing indirect lighting. There are at least 100 pillars surrounding the room, with a hole cut at the top of each one, so a hidden lighting fixture can point at the ceiling. After every 3rd pillar, a sideboard provides the staff a place to leave dishes or load trays. At the door into the vast dining room, Danny jumps from the corridor to hang from the opening at the top of the first sconce. He swings hand over hand from one pillar sconce to the next. The floor might be weight sensitive, but the sideboards can't be, or every meal would trigger alarms. He swings a couple of times, walks across a sideboard, swings a little more, walks on the next sideboard, and repeats. When he lands in the next corridor, 90 feet closer to his goal, he's more warmed up than tired. Bach had to file blueprints of proposed construction with San Juan County to get building permits on Orcas Island. Manny got the blueprint from the county's public website and mapped a route through the building for Danny. He needs to reach a basement on the east side of the structure. The rooms are weight sensitive, but the corridors and stairs are not. The stolen ID badge convinces the smart house that he belongs there. As Danny slips through the mansion, he hears the staff get louder. Walkie-talkies carry chatter at such high volumes that the little speakers distort, and staff members run, making it simple for him to hear them coming and duck behind a sofa or tuck behind a door until they pass. The commotion travels away from Danny. He passes through the largest, best-equipped kitchen he's ever seen in a private residence. The exit faces the T-junction of a corridor that looks borrowed from a television broadcast studio. The wall facing him is glass from the waist up, for a width of 20 feet or so. On the other side of the glass, a dimmed control room with more than 36 video screens. 2 security personnel monitor the feeds. Danny pauses. None of the videos look like views of this island or the house and grounds. They all show angles on downtown streets. He recognizes various landmarks around Seattle, the Science Center, Jazz Alley, outside the Seahawks Stadium, Belltown, near the Crocodile. One guard types notes. The other guard has a joystick and, unlike any typical broadcast control room, a desk-mounted steering wheel. Danny realizes he has just found the invisible intellect overriding the Desti cars. Without further thought, he strides to the control room door. He tries waving the stolen ID badge at the proximity pad next to the door. The pad glows green, and he hears the door unlatch. He throws the door open and glides into the room. His hand finds a large steel thermos parked on a counter, and just as the guard typing notes looks his way, Danny smashes the thermos into his temple. The guard slumps over the control panel, out. The second guard, late in diverting his attention from the screens, scrambles to stand. He has a modern office chair with 5 legs, and his feet tangle. He reaches his full height but struggles to balance. That gives Danny plenty of time to lay a vicious roundhouse kick into the guard's jaw. It lands with such force that the man's head snaps to the side and cracks one of the TV screens. He melts to the floor as if boneless. Danny still holds the now dented thermos. He unscrews the lid and finds the thermos full of hot coffee. He pours the coffee into all the controls and keyboards. Tossing the empty thermos aside, he grabs the guard slumped on the control panel and wrestles the security jacket off him. He puts it on. Then he pulls the guard fully to the floor and pushes him up against the glass corridor wall. He scans the monitors, looking between them until he discerns in the gloom which way their power cords lead. Near the floor, to one side, he finds several multi-outlet power strips plugged into the wall. He tears the power strips out of their outlets and the monitors wink out. Danny turns to the door he came in. It has a quick-set lock on the inside. He sets it to lock, then steps out into the corridor, closing the door behind him. The dim control room has no monitors on and no one in sight. It looks like the shift has gone off duty. That's all he has time for, but he stopped the Desty shenanigans and obtained part of a disguise. Not bad for 40 seconds of work. He drifts further down the hall until he finds an elevator, an impressive feature in a residence. It's small, perhaps 3 people could fit in it. He presses the button for the basement and the doors slide closed. The elevator drops so slowly, he wonders if it's moving at all. But as it gets to each floor, a digital display decrements the floor number, and the elevator plays an annoyed-sounding digital "eh." When the doors open to reveal the basement, they also reveal a Skyhouse staff member waiting, a slender Sikh man, judging from the turban. He has his back to the elevator and seems oblivious to the alarms and commotion of the security guards responding on other floors at the other end of the mansion. He's just maintenance staff who poked the button for the elevator and looked away, bored. Before the man even notices him, Danny clamps a judo sleeper hold on him, a rear naked choke. He wraps his right arm around the man's throat and clutches his own left bicep, while the left arm presses the man's head into Danny's right arm. When Danny applies pressure with his wrist bone, he cuts off both oxygen to the brain from the esophagus and blood to the brain through the carotid artery. The Sikh must have had martial arts training at some point, because as soon as Danny has the choke sunk in, the man taps out on Danny's arm. This puzzles Danny. Does the staff do this to the guy all the time? Who thinks someone that sneaks up on them to choke them is following tournament rules? When Danny doesn't let up, the man taps out again. After 5 seconds, the Sikh realizes he's in real trouble and begins to struggle. But Danny only needs to hang on for 4 more seconds, and the guy is out. As Danny lowers the man gently to the floor, he scans the low-ceilinged basement and sees no one else. Because Danny was careful with the sleeper choke, the Sikh could reawaken in a mere 10 seconds. Right next to the elevator, he finds a maintenance closet about 10 feet by 10 feet, filled with mops, brooms, cleaning supplies, a sink, and boxes of N95 masks. He checks the doorknob and verifies that it locks from the outside. He drags the limp Sikh into the closet. Then as he leaves, he locks the door. The basement reveals the bones of the house. The architect had it burrowed into the hill to minimize disturbing the tree line, while still providing a massive 66,000 square feet of living space. The basement shows many of the concrete pillars that the house rests upon, a Japanese system that makes it more earthquake-proof than resting it on a conventional concrete slab. He quickly surveys the well-ordered maze of color-coded pipes and ducts. He weaves through the pillars, staying alert for staff while visually tracing the electrical conduits. A sound that blends a roar and a hum grows louder, and at last he finds what he seeks. Next to the blowers supplementing the heat pumps, the main electrical panels for the house. He swings the doors open on all 4 panels. Each breaker has a neat, professional label. After a minute studying them, he feels confident that he can knock out the power to any room the team calls out. He extracts his phone from his hip pocket. The comms to Quinn remain open, but Danny isn't certain whether any signal can penetrate all the concrete and earth surrounding him. He whispers, "In position." No response. Something is working, though, because while he has the phone at his ear, he can hear Rory at her fierce, imperious best, telling people off, left and right. He smiles at hearing his friend in character. He figures that when he shuts off power, security will hurry down here and simply turn it back on. He's already smiling at Rory's diatribe, but when he finds a fire extinguisher and a hefty fire axe nearby, his smile broadens. There are ways to turn off a panel, so it can't be turned back on. Chapter 19. 10 minutes earlier. Air-gapped, Manny says. That's my best guess now. I hope that doesn't mean what I think it means, Quinn mourns. Mr. Licks has snuck down a dirt road that follows the east edge of Bach's compound, behind the outbuildings all the way down to the water. Manny found it on the county blueprint. Construction crews used it to haul materials for building the mansion, but when construction finished, Bach stopped maintaining it. The ice cream truck's front bumper has gently bent saplings and tall weeds to sneak down the trail. Now they're tucked among a stand of trees behind the compound's large pool house. I have complete control of the house network, Manny continues from his perch on the anvil case. I've looked through all the folders and directories. I can dim the lights, turn up the music, set the clocks, turn off surveillance. But I haven't found any aerospace files or programs. I think he set the satellite transmission and ground control servers on their own network, with no connection to the smart home network. Cisco, listening from the driver's seat, finally gets it. Oh, air-gapped, like no wires between the home network and the space network, just air. Far as I can tell. Quinn ponders. They have a Wonderboom speaker on the dashboard, so Quinn, Manny, Cisco, and Cooper can hear what comes over the comms from Rory and Danny. Now the wireless speaker whispers in Danny's voice, "In position." And a half-beat later, much louder, "The Queen of Shadows sees all, and what I see next for you, it should make you tremble." The men in the van guffaw. "Sell it, Chica," Cisco enthuses. Cooper allows, "I'm more charming, but I'll give it to her for intensity." Quinn checks the time on his phone and decides he can't spare a moment to flip shit at Cooper for bragging. Backslap. "Cisco, you heard the Queen," he says. "Make 'em tremble." Cooper's glorious teeth gleam in the dark of the van. He picks up his rifle and heads for the door. "Hey," Quinn says. Cooper pauses at the back of the van, one hand on the door handle. "Fine night, boy. If they hurt him..." Cooper grins. "Oh, I'll make 'em pay." He slips out into the night. Quinn feels like he just let a mean dog off its leash. Cisco, more respectful of rank, replies, "What you got in mind, boss?" Mayhem. Whatever it takes to interfere with that transmission. Get creative. Danny's heading to the basement, so pull the guards to the top floors. Cisco produces the black balaclava he wore when they kidnapped Rory. Pulling it over his face, he says, "I love my job." Then he's gone. Quinn performs a mental check. Rory, trying to annoy them enough to get Brody's attention. Danny, hunting down the campus power. Cooper, hunting Night Boy. Cisco, starting a diversion. "We've still got to find Brody." Maybe Brody's not found by computer, Manny guesses. We could look for the building that has a big dish or antenna. "Does the tracker show?" Manny grunts. "I forgot all about that thing." Maybe he's not wearing it, but maybe he is. Manny presses some keys. We gotta go all in, Quinn decides. Wait for Rory's last cue, then we're using that rocket. Okay. One thing at a time. Let me find Bach or figure out what building they'll transmit from, Manny grumbles. You poor guy, Quinn fake sympathizes. The burden of the multi-talented. Manny keeps typing and holds his focus on his screen, but manages to mumble, Your face is the burden of the multi-talented. Chapter 20. Time Indeterminate. "Oh, dipshits, where are you?" the guard sings songs. His deep voice echoes in the wine cellar. Then he steps into Nightboy's view. He looks like a bald mountain dressed in tactical black. He has more crap on his belt than a uniformed cop, and an AR slung across his back. "Check the other one," he tells someone Nightboy can't see. Then he walks right up and looms over Nightboy. His eyes register that his captive is awake, but he says nothing. He squats and checks the duct tape bonds on Nightboy's ankles, then pops up and walks around the chair. Nightboy feels rough hands testing the bonds on his wrists. Then the guard completes the circle, strutting around to Nightboy's front. He eyeballs his captive. Nightboy doesn't bother looking back. His head hurts, and he sees no point in a staring contest with a goon. "You got good taste in knives," the guard says. Nightboy hears metallic clicks. He looks up and sees that the guard has Nightboy's black Cthulhu multi-curve knife. "Badass and beautiful," the guard says, turning the knife from side to side for visual inspection. "Just like me." He leers at Nightboy. Nightboy hears a slap and a gasp from one aisle over. "Who were you talking to on the phone?" a gruff voice demands. "Please don't. There is no need to strike me," cries a second male voice with an Indian accent. Two more slaps resound in the cellar. "Get some, Bo," Nightboy's guard cheers. His dark eyes meet Nightboy's. "And you're next. But first you're giving me the sheath for this beauty." He stoops until his face nearly touches Nightboy's face. His breath smells of beer and baked beans. He brandishes the black batwing blade, then touches the honed tip to Nightboy's cheekbone. Nightboy tries to pull away from the knife, but the chairback stops him. He shudders, and that tiny movement makes the honed tip pierce his skin. "I'm going to free your hands so I can get that sheath. But if you try anything," the guard threatens, "you're going to taste more of this knife than you ever wanted." He rolls the knife in his hands so its ripsaw spine touches Nightboy's face. Then he flicks it down, shredding the skin of Nightboy's cheek. He feels hot blood well up, then drip from his jaw. He knows the serrated side of the blade leaves a harsh cut with chewed-up edges, probably scarring his face for life. He grunts through gritted teeth. "Coward." The guard double takes. "What did you just call me?" "I have a concussion," Nightboy says. "I'm unarmed, tied up. Then you knife me? You're a baby-ass coward." The guard snarls low in his throat and rears his right arm back. Nightboy figures one more hard blow to his head will probably end his life or leave him with permanent Dane brainage. Terror rocks his body, yet he glares the best "fuck you" he can at the guard. Defiantly, he raises his voice. "You kidnapped me because of what I know, but go ahead, knock it out of my brain, piss off Brody Bach." "Ike!" The other guard steps out from among the wine bottles. He's a hairier version of the guard hassling Nightboy. "Boss wants that one for questioning." Ike lowers his arm. "He can't take what I'd give him. That's for sure. What's with your eyes, fucker?" Nightboy says nothing. "Freak," Ike mutters. Nightboy sags as the guard turns away. He's a wise ass full of attitude by nature, and his knee-jerk reaction could have gotten him damaged for life. His head aches too much to rationally think through his situation. He isn't exactly claustrophobic, but he hates being confined. His parents placed him in a mental institution for their own convenience when he hit his early teens. He rebelled so thoroughly that the institution medicated him and restrained him, sometimes around the clock, to prevent him from running away. He swore no one would ever hold him against his will again. He's not thinking what is smart or dumb, what is safe or dangerous. The compulsion to get free overrides everything. Though once he's free, he cannot conceive of any way he can overcome two guards who look like Drax the Destroyer's dumber brothers. But what the hell, he thinks. Going along with their plan probably ends up with me dead. If I can get my hands free, I can at least get my belt knife. So he goads Ike with, "Run your mouth, you frightened pansy bitch." Ike, who paced away among the wine racks, turns and stares in disbelief. Then he laughs. "You don't get your situation, asswipe. You got no room for shooting your mouth. Hit a tied-up man with your noodle arm. Who fucking cares? Too scared to untie me for a fair fight." Ike's eyes harden. Bo says, "Who cares what he says? Stay pro." Ike telegraphs what he's thinking, moving a death stare from Night Boy to the Cthulhu knife to Bo and back to the knife. He stares at the knife a long time before he glares at Night Boy again. Night Boy glares back, barely daring to breathe. "Let's see who's running his fucking mouth," Ike says. He walks behind his captive. Night Boy feels the knife slice through his bonds. Slowly, his dead hands seem to catch fire as circulation returns to them. He pulls his hands around and into his lap, and that sets his forearms tingling. Suddenly, he feels himself manhandled from behind. His shoulder gets roughly shoved forward. Repeated tugging at his waistband nearly gives him a wedgie, but the guard can't yank off the sheath because Night Boy's belt runs through it. Ike steps around in front of him again. "Belt off," he orders. "Gimme that sheath." Night Boy has the perfect chance to get at his belt buckle knife, but the man in front of him holds a much larger, much better knife. The guard outweighs him by at least 40 pounds and probably has combat training and experience. Night Boy's hands lie weak and tingling in his lap, on the ends of sleeping forearms filled with pinpricks. He hesitates. Chapter 21. 2:45 a.m. Alone in the basement, Danny studies the mansion's electrical grid. He holds the fire axe lightly in his right hand, while his eyes follow the trunk line away from the panels, up the wall and across the low ceiling. At the adjoining wall, the conduit exits to the outside. When Rory says the signal word, he wants to shut off the breakers, then destroy the panels using the axe. But cutting off the power will plunge the underground room into blackness, so how can he see to axe the... Back where he entered, the elevator doors lumber open. A deep voice says, "Bish?" Danny squats low and sidles behind a massive water heater. He peers between the water heater and a concrete pillar, through a cage of elaborate plumbing, and sees a burly man wearing a flat-top haircut and the neon green Sky House staff polo. He clutches a walkie-talkie in one hand. "Bish, where are you?" He must be looking for the man in the turban. Silently, Danny eases the axe to the ground and picks up a fire extinguisher. It feels heavy in his hand. The inspection label verifies it was filled this month. He waits. The burly man steps tentatively into the basement, unsure where to look. "Brody Bach," Rory's bellowing Queen of Shadows voice projects in a tinny, miniaturized version from Danny's phone. Danny mutes it. He peeks past the water heater and sees the burly man cocking his head. Maybe the roar of the air fans buried the voice enough to confuse him. "Bish, it's Sven. I'm here to relieve you." A supply closet door suddenly shakes with pounding. A muffled voice calls from the other side. Sven steps to the door and opens it. "Bish, how the hell did you lock yourself in?" "Intruder," Bish says. "Someone choked me out and locked me in here." His brown eyes look angry as he storms out of the closet, head swiveling. "Maybe he's still down here." A .45 appears in Sven's hand. The angled trigger guard makes Danny think it's a SIG or an HK. His mind races. A digital clock on one panel reads 2:47 a.m. He needs to deal with them fast so he can hear Rory's cue. He can't let Sven call for backup. He cannot let them split up and flank his position. Glancing around, he finds a pair of wire cutters a workman left on the floor. He snatches them and whips them down the aisle, far away from him and from the Skyhouse men. The wire cutter hits empty paint buckets and lands with a clatter. It sounds as if someone tripped in the dim basement light. There! Sven raises the gun and hurries toward the sound. Bish follows on his heels. When they enter Danny's aisle, they rush away from him, their backs to him. Under cover of their footsteps, Danny slips in behind them. The men stop 5 feet from the paint buckets in the dead-end aisle. "Where'd he go?" Sven begins, turning. Danny donks him above his ear with the fire extinguisher. Sven sags. Bish has barely inhaled in surprise when Danny jets the contents of the fire extinguisher into his face. Bish's hands go to his eyes and he stumbles around until he hits his head on a low duct. That knocks him to the ground, writhing. Sven shakes off the blow to his head. Danny tries to hit him with the canister again, this time in the forehead. With cat-like reflexes, Sven swipes the empty can away, sending it clanging to the floor. Sven stands. To Danny, it looks like the man unfolds into a tower. Sven's expression changes from a stunned look to pure glowering rage. Danny jabs the man in his abs and throws a palm heel strike toward his opponent's nose. It's all cover to set up a leg sweep, as Danny turns his body 45 degrees to Sven and drives the edge of his right foot into Sven's left heel. He pushes hard, turning his body weight as follow-through. Sven settles his weight onto his left leg and glares at Danny, who stumbles back as if bouncing off a telephone pole. "I rushed it," Danny rebukes himself. He sees Sven bringing his gun hand up. Simultaneously, Danny drops his head to the left, out of line of the gun barrel, slaps his left hand on top of the barrel and wrenches it toward his opponent's chest, and with his right hand, karate chops the inside of the man's wrist, which makes the gun point harder to the inside. Danny's workouts include grip training. Though Sven resists, the gun barrel turns inexorably toward him. When Sven sees his own weapon pointing at him, his eyes widen, and he lets go. Danny takes possession of the .45 and executes a hard step out. But Sven is fast, and his left hand slaps the gun before Danny can get his distance. The firearm drops to the ground between the men and to one side. Sven dives to the concrete and scoops it up. He scrambles to roll so he can shoot Danny, but as soon as his chest faces up, Danny drops on the ground with one leg over Sven's neck, one leg over his chest, and the gun arm between Danny's legs. Danny clamps Sven's wrist with both hands, pointing the .45 away from him. He thrusts his hips into Sven's shoulder and wrenches back on the straight arm. Matching hip strength against arm strength, he easily hyperextends the arm at the elbow joint and snaps it. As Sven cries out, for good measure, Danny keeps thrusting his hips, laying himself out completely on the concrete while clinging to Sven's wrist. He rolls Sven's shoulder away from his body and dislocates it. The gun falls from the guard's fingers and skitters on the concrete. Danny is pressing Sven's wrist over on itself when blows rain down on his face. Bish has pulled himself together enough to throw himself onto Danny and attempt a ground and pound. The first 2 blows didn't faze Danny, but he can't pop his hips to throw Bish off him because Sven's arm stretches between Danny and Bish. Bish has elementary technique and simply tries to punch left, right, left, right. Danny cocks his head this way and that and makes Bish not only miss, but also bruise his own knuckles on the concrete floor. Then Danny's hand finds the dropped .45 on the floor, and he uses it to clout Bish on the side of his head. The slender man flies to one side, off Danny. Danny extracts himself and points the gun at his fallen opponents. The forgotten walkie-talkie lies nearby. He kicks it, and it slides under the metal racks into a different aisle. Bish stares pure venom at Danny but stays on the ground. Sven tries to sit up without using his right arm, cries out, and falls back. Danny turns his back on them and runs up the aisle, back to the electrical panels. Breathing hard, he unmutes his phone and puts it on speaker so he can hear while he keeps the gun trained on his captives. Metallica blares from the phone. Then he hears Rory's voice, barely audible over the music. "Abandon your evil deeds, or be plunged forever into darkness." Because of attacking Sven, Danny didn't have time to figure out what room of the mansion she's in, or even what building. He throws the main power breaker for the whole compound. Immediately, the basement turns blackest black. Sven cries out inarticulate pain and frustration, echoing off the concrete pillars. Danny slumps to the floor and leans against the wall, gun in one hand, phone in the other. He can't see where the axe is, and for now, it doesn't matter. He did his job. He did it in time. He still must find the others and help them capture Brody Bach, but that's next. And catching his breath is now. Chapter 22. 5 minutes earlier. Callum Harwell has invested 4 years into convincing Brody Bach that he always has everything under control. So he bitterly resents the fact that when they're mere minutes from culminating a visionary, long-term goal, his security staff chooses now to fall to pieces. This facility, detached from the mansion but near it on its west side, resembles a miniature Houston Mission Control. Bach wears an expensive headset, speaking Mandarin as he coordinates his thrust transmission with the Chinese scientists in Xi'an Satellite Control Center. 4 gigantic 5K OLED monitors dominate the north wall. Facing them, 2 rows of workstations allow 10 scientists to monitor and control various aspects of Skyhouse Aerospace missions, from launches to reorienting orbiting satellites. For tonight's extremely illegal and highly secret mission, only 3 technicians fill the 10 spots to support Bach. Harwell has his 2 best security lieutenants in the room and 2 former Green Berets just outside. Bach's control panel has 3 monitors surrounded by knobs and switches that look borrowed from a jet fighter's cockpit. The center screen shows, in unimpressive 8-bit graphics, a bunch of thrust commands that end with transmit Y or N. But what the fuck is going on at the house? Wearing his earbud, Harwell monitors the walkie-talkie comms without Bach overhearing. Something about sensor alarms, intruders who can't be seen, and some crazy woman. He drifts toward the back of the control room so that he doesn't distract Bach, and Bach doesn't notice the unrest next door. "Mr. Harwell," an admin says on the walkie. Harwell presses a button but keeps his voice low. "Go for Harwell." "A woman entered the manse demanding to see Mr. Bach. We have her in custody." "Mr. Bach is unavailable." "We're aware, but she is quite insistent. Chris said the matter is urgent." Harwell considers a moment before responding. He's promoted Chris in the past for showing superior judgment. He keys the walkie and asks, "Who is she?" "She calls herself the Queen of Shadows. She says she had business with Mr. Bach on his soul trip." Now the matter has Harwell's full attention. "Is she dressed in black? Black hair, blue eyes?" "Yes, sir. You know her?" "Wait one." He glances across the room at Brody. The billionaire has shed his sport coat and looks relaxed in his silk t-shirt and puka shells. He's gesturing at one of the monitors, which shows a satellite view of central China. He seems engaged and in good spirits. Harwell guesses all the space stuff is going well. He has a grudge against the Queen of Shadows, a kind of love-hate fascination. To his taste in women, she is an absolute walking smoke show, hot as it gets with her slender figure and out-of-this-world eyes. But on a professional level, she almost took their mission apart in Seoul. She ensnared Brody in a setup, and was also the only reason they eluded the setup. A woman of contradictions. Yes, Harwell wants to see her. He doesn't know if he wants to fuck her or put a bullet in her head, but either way, good times. Escort her to control, he tells the admin. Harwell out. He threads his way through the workstations until he stands near Brody. He angles his body as if he's not paying attention to the call. He can't understand the Mandarin anyway. But from his long working relationship with the billionaire, it's enough to signal that he'd like to speak when Brody has a moment. After a moment, Brody ends the call and removes the headset. Got something? He asks Harwell. A night of victories, Harwell smiles. Meaning? Remember that card reader from Seoul? The one who wouldn't stop talking about Mother? She's here in our custody. Bach's attention turns fully to Harwell. He puts one hand lightly on his body man's shoulder and walks them both farther from the scientists, who murmur obliviously into their own headsets. Low, confidentially, he asks, What are we supposed to do with her? I suggest, Harwell grins, anything you damn well please. Bach looks at him, and Harwell can see the thought growing on his boss until finally Brody laughs. Night of victories. Now I get it. A little something for our enemies. Little something, Harwell says. He grips his crotch. Big something. Your choice, mate. Bach laughs, his eyes alight with the possibilities. But then he shoots a gaze at the digital wall clock. Though the space transmissions live on their own network, the clock, the ceiling speakers, and the air conditioning are all part of the unified system that runs the house. 2:45, he says. We can't let her distract us. It's totally your say, sir. She's on her way here now. I can keep her outside, or, he wheedles suggestively, you can make her witness your global power. Let her in, Bach decides, but keep her under control. If we fuck this up, we'll have two of the largest nations on Earth after us. No wuckas, sir. Victories, Harwell promises. He nods and withdraws. The digital clock reads 2:47 a.m. when the door to control opens. When Harwell said, escort her to control, he mentally pictured a docile, cowed woman, firmly gripped by multiple guards. But instead, the gentle working murmur of the control room suddenly vanishes under a sonic assault from the ceiling speakers. Crunching guitars and a leaden drum pattern fill the room with doom and anger. As one, every face in the room snaps up to look in disbelief at the speakers. Is that Metallica? One of the scientists asks. The door crashes open so hard it swings all the way and smacks the wall. The Queen of Shadows storms in, eyes ablaze. Huge volumes of thick black hair project the wildness of Medusa. Brody Bach, she projects in a ringing voice powerful enough to top the music. Stop this, harvester of sorrows, your mother forbids you. Bach whips his head around, wide-eyed. Harwell waves one hand at him like, go back to what you're doing. With the other hand, he points to himself, signaling, I've got this. The security guard named Chris follows the woman in, looking sheepish that she pulled ahead and entered before him. The Queen of Shadows tries to shove past Harwell to get closer to Bach. Harwell grabs her arms, roughly. Search her, he tells Chris. Over his shoulder, he calls to one of the scientists. Get that music off. The woman struggles and writhes. No, she shouts. What you are about to do cannot abide. Chris throws a Ruger on a nearby table, pulled from her ankle holster. Harwell plucks a tiny speaker out of her ear and tosses it next to the gun where it skitters around. Shit, Chris says. That's how she was getting information about me. The music keeps blasting. A scientist stands at the wall trying to puzzle out the fancy conference room controls. Turn it off, you bludger, Harwell shouts. The woman keeps trying to shake herself out of his grip. Settle down! He backhands her solidly across the jaw. Nothing phases her. She looks at him with blazing eyes so full of prophetic madness that, despite himself, he flinches. Now is the time of decision, she shouts into his face, powerful as a mariachi vocalist. Abandon your evil deeds or be plunged forever into darkness. On the word darkness, every electronic device in the room cuts off. The giant TV screens on the front wall blink out with a quiet sizzle. No music, no monitors, no computers, no clock, no lights. The windowless room goes so black, Harwell cannot tell if his eyes are open or closed. In the stunned silence that follows, she growls, "Heed the Queen of Shadows." He's not spiritual. He doesn't believe in God or Satan. Yet Harwell finds himself covered in goosebumps. The Queen of Shadows has been pulling backwards against Harwell's grip for the last minute. Suddenly she throws herself to the floor. The abrupt change of resistance surprises him, and she slips out of his grasp. One shocked scientist wonders aloud, "What the fuck?" Bach howls, panicked. "Fix it! Get the power back!" An explosion rocks the room. A huge center portion of the east wall collapses inward. The gaping hole admits just enough moonlight for Harwell to glimpse dust twirling in a concussive wave, which powers itself right into his eyes and mouth. Blinded, choking, Harwell loses track of events for a split second. While he rubs his closed eyes, he hears Brody roaring, "Get the power! We need fucking power!" Just before his eyes clear, he hears his security guys fire their machine guns. Chapter 23. 3 minutes earlier. One thing Quinn drummed into Rory's head, when in character on a job, commit, commit, commit. If you convince yourself your character is real, you'll convince the mark. She has no trouble hanging on to her courage as she steamrolls past Bach's first level of mediocre guards, armed with little more than walkie-talkies. She faced down scarier people when she was a teenager fleecing tourists in New Orleans. But once the guard named Chris takes her in hand, he summons two men who have hard, no-nonsense gazes and carry sand-colored assault rifles, a big jump in threat level. One of the men gestures with his rifle, jerking the barrel slightly toward an exit door. "This way," he orders. Rory walks. No one touches her, but they made their wishes plain, and she goes along. Out the door, she's back in the sweet-smelling Pacific Northwest night. Now she is on the opposite side of the mansion from where she started, and 4 floors lower. As she crosses the flagstone patio, walking in front of Chris and the 2 guards, she glimpses distant boats, illuminated partially by lamp poles spaced along a dock. "Go to that building," one of the men says. Rory looks behind herself to see what he means. The guard gestures to the right. Instead of pointing like a normal civilian, he blades his entire hand and straightens his arm from the shoulder like undoing a bicep curl. When she looks where he indicates, she sees an entire separate building, 100 feet from the house. The building is 1 story, but the roof supports satellite dishes and what she thinks are cell towers or microwave transmitters. The structures rise out of the ambient light from the patio and vanish into the stars. She nods her head to signal compliance and heads toward the building. She picks up her pace to get a few steps ahead of her escort so she can murmur, "Cue music." She fluffs her hair with both hands. After 5 more steps, she speed walks away from them. She bets no one will shoot her for doing what they told her faster than they expected. She reaches the first door, the kind of industrial smoked glass door that business buildings have. She yanks it open and finds herself in a small vestibule. Staying in character, she kindles up prophetic energy. The door in front of her has a crash bar and she charges into it. The door flies open so hard, it startles the scientist sitting nearest to it. Rory strides in like she owns the place. In one glance, she takes in Harwell nearby, then rows of desks with computers, then Bach farther across the room talking into a headset, and finally a wall full of giant TVs. Metallica plays over the ceiling speakers, reassuring her that Manny still hears her. Her favorite part of the assignment is that it doesn't matter what she does, as long as it distracts and confuses Brody Bach. She wants to lean on his superstitious attitude toward his mom as hard as she can. It's the only button she can push, so she plans to smash it. She inhales deep into her diaphragm. "Brody Bach," she blasts. "Stop this! Harvester of sorrows, your mother forbids you." With satisfaction, she sees his startled face whirl toward her. Harwell waves Bach off. Rory pushes past Harwell, then he snags her arm, savagely yanking her back. "Search her." To someone else. "Get that music off." She hadn't noticed Chris and the two hard-eyed men follow her in. But when he begins frisking her, she determines she'll make the biggest spectacle she can. She twists, dodging his hands, shouting at Bach, "No, what you are about to do cannot abide." Harwell clutches her even harder, squeezing her upper arm in a vice-like grip. One of the armed men grabs her other arm. She can't writhe now. She feels her ankle carry yanked out of its little holster. Damn it. Chris tosses her Ruger on a nearby table. It looks like a banquet table brought in for this late-night event, bearing cardboard boxes of coffee, rows of energy drinks, and baskets of energy bars. Harwell yanks her earpiece out of her ear. Other rough hands feel up and down her body, getting personal. She feels violated, but she channels her offense into rage. She convulses her arms and legs as hard as she can, trying to break the grips on her, and she hopes like hell that the backup mic still works. Harwell says something, and the hard back of his hand whips into her jaw. She tastes blood and saliva. Unyielding, recovering fast, she inhales and bellows wildly, "Now is the time of decision." "You fucking better back me, Danny, 'cause here we go. Abandon your evil deeds, or be plunged forever into darkness." Right on cue, the room plunges into such blackness, she fleetingly thinks of Spinal Tap's album cover. How much more black could this be? And the answer is none. None more black. She's so grateful that it takes her a second to resume character and growl in her most menacing chest voice, "Heed the Queen of Shadows." While she's saying that, she is leaning back against Harwell's grip. Suddenly, she throws her weight a different direction, slightly forward, but mostly to the floor. She slips his grip. Down on the floor in the dark, she eases under the banquet table. She snakes a hand up over her head, feeling around on the table for her Ruger, when the far side of the room explodes. Harwell rubs his eyes, which clears them a little, but he's still disoriented when he feels something cool and hard press into his shin. He has the merest fraction of a moment to realize when the Queen of Shadows went to the ground, she must have snatched her gun off the table. He hears a gunshot from point-blank range, and his world shatters into pain. It feels like everything south of his right knee has gone, and he crashes to the ground. On his way down, he bangs his chin hard on the table. His teeth, thus knocked closed, cut his tongue deeply. But he won't know that until he returns to consciousness 20 seconds from now. Chapter 24. Once the sentry strolls across the flagstone patio and rounds the corner, out of sight, Cooper rises from behind a stone planter, and Rhodey runs to the back of the mansion. Modern folding glass doors form a large part of the mansion wall. He can see an Olympic-sized pool inside, lit from the bottom. Refracted light wobbles and bobs across the tile and concrete walls, revealing no one inside. Cooper tries the door handle, locked. He glances behind him. From the patio out to the boats bobbing at the private dock, he sees no one. He unslings his AR from around his neck and holds it at retention. He feels battered, inside and out. His face aches as if he's been in a boxing match. Today, he's been hit in the face and the side with airbags, shot at, rammed from behind, flipped over in the Jeep, and nearly pushed off a bridge 16 stories above water. 2 of his prized possessions have been destroyed, the Trackhawk and his battle axe guitar, and he's not at all sure that the conflict has been worth it. For GPS? Who fucking cares? He sometimes thinks he could lead this team better than Quinn. He's noticed the little conferences Quinn has with Manny and Danny that exclude him. His advice is just as good as anyone's and leads to faster results. You want to stop Brody Bach from doing something scary? Kill the little bastard. Problem solved. The more he thinks about what he's lost on this job while not getting total respect, the more pissed off he gets. No dude, billionaire or not, can get away with knocking him around and bashing his stuff. He channels the anger to buoy his tired body. He swings the 6-pound AR stock first into the glass door. It bounces off, harmlessly. Growling impatient curses, he re-slings the rifle and aims it near the door handle. The red dot in his sight is so bright in the night, it has a halo. He turns it down to a more precise level. Then he pulls the stock into his shoulder and fires a 3-round burst into the glass door. Though the architectural glass mostly holds together, a chunk next to the handle blows away. He reaches through the hole, flips the latch on the door lock, and slides the door open. His Saint AR has a great muzzle brake that minimizes recoil by shooting spent gas sideways. But it makes the gun very loud, possibly the loudest AR on the market. Surely guards will converge on the sound. He must move fast. He dashes past the pool and its chlorine aroma, holding the AR in low ready. When he hurries through the exit from the pool, he finds himself in a locker room worthy of any high-end health club. Birch benches, travertine floor. It's small, with about 10 lockers. Nobody here. He doesn't know where to look for Night Boy. He figures if he were an asshole billionaire with a kidnapped captive, he'd probably stow him in a basement. Wait, maybe a panic room? He's mentally debating the subject when he steps through the door into the next room and his rational processes stop. Cooper breathes in awe. Well now. This spacious room extends a distance equal to Cooper's whole house. He can only describe it as box, man cave. A pool table, a ping-pong table, and a foosball table dominate the center of the room, along with something long he can't identify. It looks like a massive wooden waist-high shuffleboard table. Leather sectionals offer top-notch home theater seating for a gigantic beast of a TV screen. To the side, a line of vintage arcade machines includes classics such as Pac-Man, Galaga, and Centipede, next to pinball machines featuring Kiss, AC/DC, and Aerosmith. The only lighting in the room comes from the winking machines, and a few lights hanging off the walls to spotlight collectibles. The shifting, colorful lights gleam off a futuristic dome of a chair that has various VR goggles next to it. The wall next to his right shoulder grabs his attention. It displays all the most iconic issues of Playboy magazine, going through years of cover girls, past Madonna, back to Marilyn Monroe. Not reproductions, the actual original issues. Cooper pauses to admire Farrah Fawcett's legs, smirks that Marge Simpson once graced the cover of Playboy, then forces himself to move on. He rapidly passes a wall filled with action movie posters in frames. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and a lot of Dolph Lundgren, all of them oiled up, flexing and frowning. Next he arrives at shelves of Hot Wheels. He stops to peer at the vintage models. Is that? It can't be. It is B. He lets out a low whistle. Sitting freely on a shelf, the tiny 1969 pink VW Beach Bomb bus perches with 2 surfboards jauntily sticking out of the rear window. As a car fan, Cooper knows it is the most coveted Hot Wheel ever. The Beach Bomb was a prototype and only 2 pink ones ever existed because the top-heavy design couldn't stand properly. Due to its rarity, it is valued at $175,000. And holy guacamole right next to it, a 1968 strawberry overchrome Mustang worth easily $40,000. He shoves the tiny metal cars into his jeans pocket. Trying mightily to stay on task, he moves along, only to enter the sports memorabilia section. Plexiglass cases display jerseys from Super Bowl winners, basketball winners, and World Series winners. At eye level, a shelf displays signed baseballs. Cooper gasps. Bach has 3 baseballs signed by Babe Ruth, and another signed by both Ted Williams and Stan Musial. He's pretty sure the double-signed ball must go back to sometime during World War II. He once saw one on eBay priced at over $11,000. The oldest-looking Babe Ruth ball immediately goes into his other jeans pocket. He can fit one more, and he labors to decide which to nab. His rifle hangs from his neck as he weighs a Babe Ruth ball in one hand and the Williams Musial ball in the other. His fingers rub the nubby seams as he marvels at the amount of history in his grip. A harsh voice from behind interrupts his reverie. "Freeze, dipshit!" Thank you for listening to Metal Rise, Book 3 in the Shadowfast Skyhouse Thrillogy. Continue the story for free on my YouTube channel, where I post episodes every Tuesday until the Thrillogy is complete. Don't want to wait? Grab the entire Thrillogy, Metal Spies, Metal Lies, and Metal Rise, as ebooks and paperbacks on Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, and most other online retailers. There's much more to the world of Shadowfast. Go behind the scenes by joining my newsletter list. To sign up, send your email address to shadowfast@colechase.media. Chase your adventure.